there is so much uncertainty in the world, and we are constantly bombarded with uncertain news. Why do we get so upset about it when uncertainty is the only real certainty?
I've been thinking about uncertainty for a long time, especially in my work in oncology. In that field, almost every conversation is about uncertainty. It might be someone just being diagnosed with something or dealing with end-of-life issues. I've noticed that these conversations are not just in the clinic room, but also with colleagues and people I bump into socially. It's clear that some of the ways we cope with uncertainty in the health field can also be applied to other situations when our world feels turned upside down.
Do we all live with the illusion that we have some control over our lives, and it takes something like sickness or a terrible experience to realize that was never so?
Absolutely. We build systems around control to help us get up in the morning and go about our day. But it's not until something happens to us that we realize it can happen to anyone. Most of us live our lives thinking it won't happen to us, but when it does, it's a shock and we have to figure out how to make sense of it.
Can you explain why we struggle with uncertainty? We know that nothing is guaranteed in this world, but we still struggle with it emotionally.
Uncertainty is uncomfortable for us because it goes against our evolutionary nature. Our ancestors needed to know if a tiger was going to attack them or not. We also like when things go the way we want them to. When things don't go as planned, it's uncomfortable for us. We try to make our world match our expectations, but when dealing with big things like a pandemic, it's difficult to put it in a box.
But you says that many of the ways we try to build control in our lives, like to-do lists, are harmless and helpful.
That's true. Writing a to-do list can be helpful, but when control becomes too much, people can get stuck in patterns of behavior and their lives can become small and control-driven, making it difficult to manage in everyday life.
When people are dealing with uncertainty, you says the result is often anxiety.
For the most part, anxiety is the most common outcome. Sometimes it may also show up as low mood and worries, but in my experience, anxiety is the most common. Anxiety can also cause other issues such as lack of sleep, changes in appetite, and feeling uncomfortable in the body.
Why do anxiety and uncertainty go hand in hand?
Our brain responds to uncertainty by trying to problem solve and coming up with multiple solutions, which is the process of anxiety. For example, when facing end of life, there are no answers, which causes people to get caught up in not only the big questions, but also the small decisions in life, such as what to have for dinner or what shoes to wear. This causes overthinking and overanalysis, which further exacerbates the anxiety.
To deal with uncertainty, one thing that can help is getting a handle on your anxiety story.
Anxiety often starts at a young age, and the way we frame anxiety in our lives follows us. It can be helpful to understand where the anxiety comes from and how it works. When we start to name and understand anxiety, it loses some of its power.
Can you give an example of an anxiety story, such as one from a patient or your own?
Many people have an anxiety story that shows up in social situations, such as feeling not funny enough or thinking they made a wrong joke. For some people, this story is pervasive and can be accompanied by negative self-talk. By recognizing and naming this anxiety, it can help in making the decision to go to a social event or not.
Many of us try to avoid dealing with uncertainty or anxiety because it seems like an easier option. But interviewee calls this the avoidance paradox.
When we try to avoid things, our anxiety often gets worse. An example of this is agoraphobia, where a person won't leave their house because the anxiety is overwhelming. They start by calling in sick from work and avoiding the situation, but the anxiety gradually builds over time. To manage anxiety, it's important to recognize it and work on ways to tolerate it.
What do you mean by that?
When we let anxiety show up, it diminishes. But people often don't get the opportunity to find that out because they avoid the situation. The main part of managing anxiety is learning to tolerate being anxious.